Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the ISO Review Podcast, a production of Simplify ISO. The ISO Review Podcast shares the latest international standards development and is your resource for getting the most out of your management systems. Hello, I'm Howard Fox, business coach and host of the Success Insight Podcast, and I am joined by ISO management system professional Jim Moran, who's celebrating his 33rd year delivering ISO support. Hello, Jim. Good morning. And how are you doing?
Oh, just doing great, Howard. It's a wonderful day here in Ottawa, Canada, and we're just nicely in the high 70s, not too much humidity. I think you're headed for a heat wave, aren't you?
For a few days, I think. We're a very comfortable 198 degrees right now. I do believe, or actually, I should say 88 degrees now, sitting outside with a nice cup of coffee, listening to the birds sing. But this afternoon, we are going to hit 107 degrees. And as I like to share with people, and others like to share as well, it's a dry heat. But it's going to be a hot one today.
Well, good luck to you. I hope you have enough ice buckets around to at least keep your wrists cool.
The roommate in her backyard has misters, and she has a outdoor, it's called a swamp cooler. I don't understand the logistics or the mechanics of the swamp cooler per se, but with the misters going in the swamp cooler, it's actually very nice outside. So if I do have a break, I will probably sit outside with those two running and try not to move and break a sweat.
All right. It's funny you mentioned misters. Bonnie and I were at a farmer's market on the weekend, and there was this kind of tent thing, and the ground was wet underneath. We thought, what the heck's going on with that? And a few minutes later, somebody walked into this, 10 by 10 cover, canopy, whatever, and it started misting. And I'd never seen it before. So somebody must have been traveling in California or maybe Arizona, but definitely where you are, and Nevada, wherever. And lo and behold, they brought the idea back here, and who knows, it might become a thing in Eastern Ontario. You never know.
You know, I actually think the misters are very helpful, and especially when you do have that hot weather and if there's no humidity. But I can imagine like the runners, the marathoners, the half marathoners. I imagine that when you're running a race like that, when you're finished or even during the race, running down this long tent with misters going, I think that would feel very good.
Yeah, maybe some tracks have even put them during, like on the inside, halfway
That
through.
could be. That
So
could be.
today we have an exciting new adventure that
Okay.
we're start. And for years, you mentioned 33 years. Remember in the 1987 version of ISO 9001, they had a section called Corrective Action, and they had a section called Preventive Action. Same thing stayed in 94, same thing in 2000, 2008. They all had Corrective Action and Preventive Action, and the 2015 version got rid of Preventive Action and declared, I guess you'd say, that the preventive action part where you're looking for things that could go wrong has been taken by clause 6.1 called risk analysis. So, but the big thing is corrective actions. It's always been seen as a tool to improve processes in an organization. And many of our listeners might be members of ASQ or even just studying management systems. They've probably all come across this thing called root cause analysis, which is a tool to help you discover what the issue was that caused the nonconformance. So today, we're going to turn root cause analysis on its head and present an alternative approach to improving processes. And
Excellent.
yes, thanks. And we're going to have links in the notes to the author of this work. His name's Mike Hart, And I'll give his whole name because there are a few Mike Harts out there. We'll give you his whole name and the links in the notes. But basically, he tells or teaches organizations how to stop looking at the negative and start looking at the positive. So today we're going to be talking about three main points. One is intention, and his work is called Intention relative to the intention in the workplace. He did his master's degree in business. He did his thesis on intention in the workplace. And I attended a workshop, and this idea popped into my head, and he said that's exactly how he uses it, is instead of focusing on the negative, focus on intentionally thinking about the future state. And to get to that point, get to the end of the podcast, we're going to start talking with intention and how it shapes outcome, problems versus possibilities. Then we'll be talking about how systems improve faster when you're guided by vision, not just correction. And that's clause 10.3 in ISO, in all the standards, all the ISO standards, improvement, continual improvement. And then we'll finish up with how intentionality builds engagement and psychological safety. And that's one of the biggest things leaders have to do, Howard, to unleash the incredible power of their employees, is to reduce fear. And if we can use intentionality to reduce fear, that'll really improve the effectiveness of any actions where you're trying to improve your system. So the reasons you want to improve your system are because errors cost money. The errors cost huge amounts of money. Just mathematically, this isn't a theory, it's a mathematical fact. If you operate your business at a 2% net profit and you have an error that costs $1,000, then you have to do $50,000 of new revenue just to end up with that $1,000. Like $50,000 times 2% is $1,000. So when you think of how costly mistakes are and how unproductive, and of course, not only financially unproductive, but the morale of of workers in organizations that are constantly plagued with errors, it sinks as well. So not only does your bottom line sink, the morale sinks, and that further impacts the negative side of the balance sheet. So by finding a better way to do corrective actions and come up with an output that is where you want to be instead of an output that you're hoping doesn't get worse, this intention in the workplace approach can make all the difference in the world. The one example that Mike used in his workshop last month was he showed a slide of British Airways, if our listeners can picture this in their mind's eye. It was a slide split in the middle. On the left side, it showed two people standing at a carousel. It was British Airways, by the way, Howard. Excuse me. It was British Airways. The left side of the slide showed a couple of people at a carousel waiting for their baggage. And that was the way we would normally start a corrective action, was with this problem. And the problem was the baggage didn't appear. So you typically use Ishikawa fishbone. 5 Whys is part of that as well. Ford has a program called the 8D section and the 8D process. And there are a lot of classical 7 really famous ones that people might use to find out what caused this problem. So the right-hand side of the slide shows someone leaving the airport with his bag, and the focus became not why didn't the bag show up? The focus became, then the phrase they used was ultimate customer experience. So instead of saying why didn't the bag show up, they're focusing on how do we create the ultimate customer experience. So that's the future state they wanted, was an ultimate customer experience. Naturally, your customers, when they have an ultimate experience, they'll become ambassadors for you and tell people how great the flight was. And they often are sought out by future flyers to say, how did you like them? If you have a friend who has just used that airline, you want to hear from them about what kind of experience they had. So maybe our listeners are ISO certified. If they are, they have to, in order to stay certified, they have to demonstrate that they've done continual improvement, clause 10.3. They have to identify and correct problems, nonconformances, which is 10.2. So this does both, but it does it with a completely opposite approach to what we're all used to. And again, this is for all ISO standards, not just quality. So if we start with there, I'll just give a quick refresh on what we'll be looking at. How we'll be looking at intention shapes outcome, problems versus possibilities first. Then we'll look at how systems improve faster when guided by vision, not correction. Then finally, intentionality builds engagement and psychological safety. So starting with intention shapes outcome, looking at the possibilities instead of the problems. Traditional root cause analysis tends to anchor us in blame, and error, and past failures. So many people listening have probably been to the first meeting of a root cause analysis, and sometimes it feels kind of heavy. The air's kind of heavy. Sometimes we look for blame. Enlightened companies would use the phrase, what is the weakness in our system that allowed this to happen? That's what I teach all my clients instead of saying who screwed up. Look at the system, look at the weakness. But this approach is I believe, I'm really excited to give it a try. Instead of looking at the blame, the error, past failures, let's get started with what future state do we want? So if you could put that up on a whiteboard, then you could use sticky notes to describe the future state. And this changes the focus from errors and past failures to purpose, possibility, and growth. So it can change the tone of the meeting, Howard, to one of more positivity, one of more hope, or you might say, one of what can we do to make us move towards this perfect state, the ultimate customer experience. So this particular approach, it reframes root cause analysis from punishment to improvement. Not that all places are always in a punishing mode. Hopefully they aren't. I have heard of stories where people have been fired after a root cause analysis, and that definitely does not bode well for that company, since it becomes an action filled with fear. The other thing that leads to, by the way, is that people tend to hide nonconformances when it's a punitive, harsh, debilitating culture. People will either they'll rename them something else, they'll hide them, and then I have to tell you, in the years I've been at this, Howard, when a company's culture is one of hiding nonconformances, when it blows, it really blows. It's ultimate destruction for sure. So that's just a hint about how intention shapes outcome. You can read a lot more about it in Mike's paper if you have the chance to take a look at it. It'll be in the show notes for sure. So the second point, we said that systems improve faster when they're guided by vision, not just correction. So rather than just being focused on the root cause for this specific nonconformance, look at the whole future that you want, and that can produce much more focusing on the desired future state. You might be asking yourself the question, what needs to change to make that state normal. So if you can imagine the best state that you could have, and of course, in that best state, you're much more productive, people are more involved, you're making fewer errors, and you're probably doing better risk analysis for clause 6.1, I might add too. So when you're thinking about the future state, in order to get there, you have to get rid of the nonconformance that you had. So you're focusing on how can we build this best state for us. At the same time, you're finding ways to get rid of the things that are either not contributing to the future state, or get rid of things that are actually being a barrier to you getting to the future state. So you're not just doing a root cause analysis to find out the cause of nonconformance. You're looking at a bigger, more holistic picture, and you're finding ways to remove barriers. So anything that any company does to remove barriers of any kind, communication barriers, recording nonconformance, or health and safety, environmental concerns, anything you can do to remove barriers is just by itself going to improve processes as well. I think I've said in one of these podcasts or another, communication is a synonym for life. That was in a video I showed back in the 80s when I was teaching college. So if you can think of removing barriers to the future state, identify the future state, remove barriers that are getting you to the future state, needless to say, processes will improve much more quickly. And it's important to include as many people as possible. They often recommend this in root cause analysis explanations as well. Use a cross-functional team, but definitely include the people where the issue was found, and ask them, what would the best future be for you? What would your best future state look like? Sometimes top management has to demonstrate that I won't say sometimes. I'll say top management has to demonstrate that they're in favor of working towards a future state that everybody can get behind. And together, the word team, TEAM, together, everyone achieves more. And if you can get a future state envisioned in your organization, first of all, for the whole organization, but specifically for each individual process that you're working on. And remember, clause 4.4 in all the standards talks about the system itself, and it talks about determining what processes you need to meet your objectives. And then the second part is show their interaction. So if you can design a future state with flowcharts or whatever you'd like to use that shows the ideal operations of your business and what people are trying to achieve, and 6.2, your objectives, quality objectives, health and safety objectives, environmental objectives, you can use that as your end goal and your vision. And what this does by looking at the future state, guided by vision, not just correction, this approach leads to more sustainable, innovative, and preventive improvements. So, and because of that, or as a result of that, then it's going to stick better. That's when everybody understands it and is behind it. And then the last thing we talked about, or we'll talk about, is intentionality builds engagement and psychological safety. When everybody knows that the goal is a better future, they speak up more freely. Once again, communication and top management supporting the idea of everybody talking to each other and sharing ideas. Not one of us, Howard, no one of us knows as much as all of us. So when you can get people communicating and contributing honestly, the result will be sort of focused on the future, forward looking, if you will, and not backwards on blaming. And again, you can certainly achieve some improvement by you're asking the question, what's the weakness in our system that allowed this to happen? But you get much more, you get a much stronger result when you're thinking of putting all your efforts into creating the future state that you've imagined. So when you frame root cause analysis around intention, this aligns with creating a learning culture as well, where the goal is to share improvements. And so often, Howard, I've seen in that last 3 decades, when you make an improvement in one area, it often spills over to the at least to the for the action that was taking place before that improvement, and it also benefits the following action after the improvement. If you think in terms of well, the flow chart, one step leading to another, to another, to another. If and that's another thing to consider in this future state. Make sure that the future state you are envisioning uh, doesn't impact the previous action, and it doesn't impact negatively the next action. So the future state now grows to a slightly larger view of the activities you're talking about and the things you're trying to cover. So, as I mentioned before, we'll make sure that there are links in the show notes to Mike's work, and we'll be certainly looking forward to seeing if anyone has anything they'd like to get clarified.
I love this. And as you were discussing intentionality in the workplace, to focus on um, the whether it's the problem versus the possibility, vision versus connection and intentionality, building engagement and psychological safety. I couldn't help but think about this aligns very nicely in many ways with the coaching profession and the work that I do. One, it's built around positive psychology and strength as opposed to deficiency. So focus on your strengths, what you do well, versus focus on what you don't do well. And also the team dynamics is, and when you use this example, you walk into a meeting after some event has occurred, a nonconformance has occurred. There's a cloud, dark cloud in the room, and everybody's ready to shoot at each other to place blame,
Mm.
as opposed to going into the room saying, "What is our desired state?" I mean, what needs to happen, whether it's internal processes, is it our customers' experience with us? What is the ideal state we want to achieve? And then as opposed to placing blame anywhere, it's what can you do, team one or sub team one, sub team two, to improve the outcome of within the work that you're doing and your piece of this business or process that we need within our organization. So I really felt this entire episode touched very nicely on a lot of the principles of the coaching that we aim to do, especially with high performing teams.
Mhm. And the high performing teams don't get there by looking at what's not working. They get there by looking at how good they want to be.
Right.
And it,
And you're all in this together. You don't get to be a high performing team by people falling off the cliff along the way. You get
yeah,
to be a high performing team by everybody understanding what role they play.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, we should maybe interview Mike on the next podcast.
That's something else that I was thinking about as you started to go down this route, and because we've never had a guest on the podcast, and I think it would be really nice to invite Mike Hart on the episode to talk further about this topic. We'll of course have a link to his website and to the article itself, but I think that is a wonderful idea, Jim.
All right. So I'll line them up and perhaps we'll have them. I think we can organize it for a couple of weeks. So we'll make sure we give our listeners a chance to hear from the man himself.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Well, another great episode, another lens into this topic of international standards development and really addressing a very important area within this topic, and one that is a little counterintuitive. Focus on the problem, you focus on the desired state, and the opportunities that are produced because of it. I love it. Now, Jim, before we head out, just a reminder for our listeners, and I'll let you say it this time. I think I said it the last few times on my own, but where should our listeners go if they would like to learn more about you and your work?
Thanks. Our main site, simplifyiso.com, has some information and links to the do-it-yourself ISO 9001 package we have, and it has a contact button there and a little explanation of how the process works. And the other is the International Management Systems Institute site, imsipro.org. And just wherever they listed the podcast, there'll be a link there, and it'd be great to hear from some folks.
Sounds good. Well, we will definitely provide those links. I know we've got a couple gap checklists on the IMSI website, so we'll have links to not only the website, plus to the gap checklist. We've got your links on LinkedIn and your articles on LinkedIn, as well as your YouTube channel. So we will definitely have that for our listeners going forward. All right, Jim, good to see you again. And we'll get this episode with Mike Hart lined up, and hopefully, if not the next episode or the one shortly thereafter. And it's be nice to add another voice to the great work that we are doing.
Absolutely. And thanks for taking care of us and helping us get this out to the public, Howard. It's great.
My pleasure. All right, Jim, I'm going to do a quick close, and you and I can have a final chat. All right, folks, you have just been listening to the latest episode of the ISO Review Podcast, which is a production of Simplify ISO, and as Jim has mentioned, we've done many times, you can find us online at simplifyiso.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, go out there, have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on a future episode of the ISO Review Podcast. Take care now.